Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sorted with Sandy. Today we have Dr. Kaushik with us. And if getting a job in NHS, councils, or university is on your list, this is a podcast that you must watch till the end. Dr. Kaushik is an assistant professor at the School of Architecture and Built Environment at Northumbria University. He's an architect with an MSc from University College London and a PhD in Sustainable Construction Design and Management. Dr. Kaushik is also a fellow of the Higher Education Academy, UK, and Dr. Kaushik has 14 years of professional experience across roles such as architect, project coordinator, and research associate. Dr. Kaushik's research has garnered 2,500 plus citations, including on government policies in the US, Australia, and EU. He has more than a decade of experience in UK higher education across various universities and has worked with academics and professionals from a dozen nations worldwide. Today, Professor Amit will tell us how he landed 3 university jobs and helped international students and dependent visa holders secure 14 NHS interviews and several interviews at local institutions like councils. If someone is looking for a council, university, or an NHS job, why should they listen to you?
Thank you so much, Sandy, for having me here. I've been in higher education sector for more than a decade. I have secured dozens of interviews in higher education for myself and cracked several other roles. I've also helped as part of my job hundreds of students throughout my career, with their job hunts, helping craft them CV, and other behavioral part around job hunt. Apart from that, I've also helped several professionals land interviews in various public sector bodies. That includes NHS, local councils, and other civil services. If I think about just NHS, I think there were 14 interviews in the NHS alone and several others in public bodies. So yeah, I've been helping for over a decade to various students and professionals in their job and journey.
Okay, you mentioned that you've got 14 interviews at NHS. How many applications were actually made? Because 14 could be out of 100 applications as well, or from 200 applications as well. So, how many applications are we talking about here?
We are talking about around 25, and that too were in 4 NHS trusts. So we were targeting 4 NHS trusts. So in those 4 NHS trusts, regional NHS trust, I helped apply 25 applications, and out of that, 14 landed interview.
A track record of around 60% response rate, if I do a rough math, which is unheard of so far, not just in NHS, Amit, but also in other applications. So, okay, I'm interested to know more. How does the entire NHS job application work? And if someone has to apply to a job, what does the process look like from the time they click on apply button till the time they get the job offer? What does the entire process look like?
So the process is, the blueprint is broadly similar to other organizations. It's just that the context is different. So it starts with job posting. Usually, it is after internal round, which is when they when they post it internally for anyone to apply internally. Sometimes it's a combined. So you'll see a public listing, but internal applications are also welcome. That means there is more competition. Once they've gone through their specified time, they'll close the application and they'll go through shortlisting. In that, person specification is the game. Essential and desirable criteria. They pick that up. Based on that, they shortlist. They'll invite you for an interview. How it usually works is that you will get an email with a link. Because it's all automated, very rarely we've seen that a person is calling you to tell you that you've secured an interview. It'll be an email that you use during your application process, and it'll take you to a calendar where it'll give you probably 3 or 4 options within the space of 2 days to apply. And of course, then you go for the interview, and with an interview, again, there are rules because these are public sector bodies. They have a very strong and strict rule book which they follow. And they follow evidence-based invitation, which means that sometimes they have to invite certain number of candidates for interviews. So sometimes it's 5. And the success is purely based on how you convince them that you have enough evidence to prove that you have required experience or skill for essential criteria. But then again, it's a very competitive environment because these are government jobs. They have really good benefits in terms of jobs, so you have higher competition, and the requirements itself all the requirements themselves are really, really strict. So they're very strict about whether you qualify or not. If you don't, it's a hard no. And the positive side, what I would say is that most of the jobs will offer sponsorship. It is quite context specific. However, most of them have got sponsorship option, but again, contextual factors like the urgency that they want that person in, how strong is the competition if you've got someone who doesn't require, if let's say you are neck and neck with a person who doesn't require sponsorship and they are just 1 point behind you, they would prefer the other person, but of course they have to do paperwork accordingly. But then again, it's if you do a stellar stellar performance during your interview, it'll really help you. So that's like you go to the interview, do a really good job, and then again, depending on the day your interview was and how quickly they want you to be on board, usually you would see that if you're selected, you will get a reply within 24 to 48 hours or 1 to 2 working days. Um, if not, nowadays or lately, we've seen that it's all automated. You get an automated response giving you the outcome, and it's usually a letter which explains you that you haven't got the job, but good
Okay.
luck.
Okay, that's an elaborate process. I have two follow-up questions, Professor, here. That first, how fast this process moves, because a lot of international students are on this two-year 2-year visa timeline, and it looks like from your what you've explained, it may take around a month or as well to close this. So, how fast this process moves? How much time does it take in the entire process? That's first. And
Yeah.
second is, you mentioned that a lot of roles get sponsored, but we've realized that a lot of entry level roles they don't get sponsored. So is there a band that you should be targeting if you're looking for sponsorship roles?
So for the first question, the timeline, it depends on from where we are looking at. If you are looking at closing of application, if the trust really needs that person or the organization or the department, it's a key role, let's say in finance or even if it's in admin, they'll push for things to go harder and faster. So that means they will try and get an interview within 2 weeks maximum after the closing of the
2 weeks.
deadline,
Okay.
and they will take the decision as soon as possible they can. In terms of after that, if let's say you're selected and you require a sponsorship, all these organizations already have their licenses in place. So it is
Okay.
just about how fast the hiring manager is and how early they need you to be on the desk. So they may move the application and issue a course within 2 days. I have seen personally examples where within 24-hour course was issued. So then the ball is in your court, right? Once they give you
Yep.
course, they ask you to apply.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the
Okay.
first bit. The second bit was about
The second bit was that
the
do all
band.
roles get sponsored? Because yeah, there I think there is a certain band that you have to be in.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because when you look at UKVI's requirement, they've set a minimum requirement for tier 2. So a lot of times we've seen that most of the application, which are roughly, if you look at NHS band 6 and above, you'll see that most of them qualify. Again, that it depends on which type of role you're seeking. But if you look at band 6 and above, most of them should qualify that minimum requirement. Interestingly, we've also seen that some of the very few, rarely, some of the entry level role when you apply, they don't say that we will not give you sponsorship. So they don't say. So they ask you this question that do you require sponsorship? If yes, then say yes. Because in a lot of jobs, let's say if it was an academic job and it was an admin job where university on the other hand tries to save most of its licenses for academic job. So if it's a job that they don't want to spend costs on, they will straight away say no. That during the application process itself, they'll say that we will not be able to sponsor. And I think that's the similar case with NHS as well, where if they are not ready to sponsor, they will be very clear about it that this role doesn't come with sponsorship. Having said
Yep.
that, we've seen multiple examples where even the entry level role, there is an option.
There is an option sometimes, but I think it will slightly depend on the technicality of the role, how rare that role is, and if it is high skilled role.
Yes.
I have my next question, which is regarding the process. I have seen that NHS doesn't take CVs at all. Do you know the reason why, and whether it is same for all the civil services job or all council jobs as well? Is it a rule which goes across in government jobs?
You would see that a lot of public sector bodies have their own system. So rather than collecting just your CV, which if you look at it is an information problem, right? If they how do they collect information? They compare. How do they compare candidates? If they ask you to fill something somewhere, that means they are prepping you or the information in a way that they can do different types of analysis with that information. How many jobs were applied? How many of them were, hit minimum criteria, or etc. So same with NHS as well. You would see that they have very lengthy form that they want you to fill with different sections in it. And the whole idea is that they can extract that information whichever form they want to. So it's more of a data question. And you would see that in civil services as well. You will see that in, I think, with council and other local bodies as well.
Okay, interesting. Now, this brings me to a follow up question that since there is no straightforward application process, you can't just upload a CV and cover letter and apply. The entire process takes a long time. So, how much time were you spending while making those 14 applications? Because students, as I've said, they are doing their part time shifts, they are working 12 hours there, they are doing their dissertations as well sometimes, and they don't have a lot of time. How much time does the entire process take?
First three will take longer.
Okay.
First three applications, if you have clarity about the role, if you have clarity about the organization, if you're hitting the same role again and again, and let's say in different trusts, NHS trust, different government bodies, then first three will take probably 1.5 2 hours each. But because you are applying similar position, let's say you're applying for accountancy position or assistant accountant position, then you've got enough data with you. When you fill an application, it gives you an option to download the PDF. And how I recommend people who I help is that you need to look at the questions and write them down on a Word file and save it for the next application, because some of the questions may repeat themselves where you have to prove the same point again. If you're applying for similar role at similar level, there are chances that 60% of the job spec will be similar, phrased differently, but would be similar. So,
Yep.
if they're asking about, team collaboration, if you prepared an answer, so then you already have an answer prepared. So as I said, first three will take 2 hours each, but then it starts to get less and less.
Okay, so it's like in the first three applications, you are getting to learn about the process and you're getting in the groove. And once you have enough data ready from the first three applications, the fourth application might take 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you go on and it might get reduced to 40 minutes at the most. But I don't think it could go lesser than 40 minutes because a proper normal job application also takes 40 minutes, 45 minutes roughly. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
would. Yeah, I would say we should keep at least an hour, because you don't want to, even if
Rush it.
if it's the 15th application you're applying, you don't want to rush it.
Yeah. I have a follow up question. As I've realized by talking to students that they don't have enough time and they tend to use AI tools. So, can they use AI in some way to reduce that time less than an hour, maybe?
Yes, I think if you're not using AI in today's day and age, you're behind. But sometimes we forget that we need to use AI just as a tool. We let it take control. We don't proofread things. We don't we don't add the professional touch. So yeah, use AI. That's absolutely fine. If you're trying to create a narrative, if you're trying to create a structure, if you're trying to answer something in a specific structure or in a way, yes. But at the same time, once it's done, proofread yourself and try to make that application more personable. So it shouldn't read like an AI, because on the other side, there'll be humans who will be reading this and they'll pick it up.
So, it cannot be, it should not be a copy and paste. So, you have to use AI as an assistant rather than letting it take the lead on the application. You have to take the lead. You have to see what fits right, what sounds right, does it even sound human or not? And then you have to apply your judgment there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So we have discussed the application time, the application, the way of application. Like you don't have a CV, there is a form that you have to fill. How does the scoring system work? If I have applied to a job, then on the back end, how do they score my application?
So when you fill that whole form, which is usually 5 to 6 sections, at the end it summarizes and it goes in their system. Usually there's a hiring manager. They'll sit down and they'll start looking at each and every application. When they have a lot of application, they would also get help, which means that it becomes a hiring panel, then hiring manager. So there are 2 or 3 people looking at the application, and they have point systems. Point system are directly against essential and desirable criteria. And of course, essential point, they have more points. So if a desirable is 1, essential would be 2 points. And they usually work with a minimum score of essential points that is needed to qualify for an interview. So how well you've written the application, how well and clearly and straightforward you've shown them evidence based that you qualify for all the essential criteria and also some of the desirable work. And within the application, what they're trying to see is each and every application would have a section where it's just a single section where they'll say, tell us how do you qualify against the job specification. And that's where I think the main crux of the matter is how clearly you pick up each and every essential requirement, explain and put evidence against how you qualify it, whether it's skill, whether it's experience, whether it's values. So nowadays, what we are seeing is that it's not just about skills and experience, it's also about organization values. A lot of NHS trusts, local bodies, they include values point inside their desirable or sometimes essential criteria, where they put down their own values and then they say, how do you align with these? So that's the bit. And then of course, when they go through everything, they get a certain number of people who have hit the minimum mark in terms of points. And then it's the hiring manager or the shortlisting lead who would decide who gets called to the interview.
Okay. So, what I'm gathering from this answer is that if in an application I have some of the desirable criteria, but I don't have all the essential criteria, then someone in the application pool who just has all the essential criteria will be able to beat me hands on. Okay. Because I always thought the other side that desirable means that if you have it, it's an additional plus. But it seems that you need to have the basic essential criteria first, and that holds more weightage.
Yeah, so essential, is the minimum that they are looking for. And a lot of times yeah,
That's non-negotiable. Essential
yeah,
is non-negotiable.
essential is non-negotiable and you have to clearly evidence it. And a lot of times they are also aware about candidates coming from different backgrounds sometimes, or may have different contextual factors, but they may carry the skills required. So if they say that I need someone with a graduate degree, or they say that I need someone with AAT level, let's say in finance, someone with AAT qualification, they would also add or similar experience. So that's an essential criteria, but they've added that line or similar experience. Now it is up to you how you convince them, how you sit down and say, okay, fine, there's additional bit. How can I tell them that although I don't have AAT level 6 or 7 or whatever they're asking, but I have similar education, similar skills and experience that aligns with that level of expertise or requirement.
If I'm applying to a job, I filled all those 5, 6 sections, and I've taken special consideration of highlighting and justifying my essential and desirable criteria. What are 5 tips that I should remember before submitting my application? What are those 5 checks that I must do to ensure that I land the interview?
So, first and foremost, I would say understand the context, right? So, if you're applying for NHS, is it a trust? How big is the trust? Where is it? What role are you applying to? What department it is within? What unit? Sometimes it's worth looking into it because that gives you a context and you can frame your answers accordingly. I also recommend anyone applying for marketing and finance jobs to also look at the numbers. So all these public sector organization, they have to release their financial information. Have a look through it. I'm not saying you have to learn everything. Have a look through it. Sometimes those numbers, if you include those numbers in your, let's say, in one of your answers, when the manager or the hiring manager, when they read it, they can instantly see that this person has spent some time looking at what we do, where we are, what our numbers are like. And that helps a lot. The second bit is absolute clarity of the role. So job description and job specification. A lot of time I've seen candidates, they confused because these are two different things. Job description is them telling you what you'll do day to day, who you'll work with, what's the context, what are the different tasks. Specification is where they are specifying what is needed from you whether it's skills, experience, or behavioral side of things. So you have to have absolute clarity. I work with 3 times read rule, which is, anything that you want to understand, read it once, make your points, then forget it, and then come back, read it again, add more points. So absolute clarity. Then check your answers, because within any application, they will give you an opportunity to justify how do you qualify for essential and desirable criteria. A lot of times it could be through uploading a person specification document. A lot of time it is, within the application, it is a long, they give you 500 words and they say that, um, tell us how you qualify for this job. So again, that's where I was mentioning that open a Word file, write down all the points, make sure you've hit everything. Then within those answers, you need to make sure that you use some previous experience in your answer. So you're not just saying, I have done XYZ. You give them context. You give them where you did it, what year was it, what was the situation, and this is where the STAR method comes in, which NHS and public sector bodies like if you answer it in that way, whether it's application or an interview. So what was the situation, the task, the action, the result. So it shows clarity. It shows clarity in your response, and that is what they're looking for. Another tip I would recommend is embed any contextual jargon within the application answers. So what do I mean by that is when you read job description and a person specification, you would see they are using certain words. Okay, organization, profession, and sometimes even regions have certain words that they use, and the clue is in the job posting. So you look at those words and you include that in your answer. So that helps a lot as well when you're using the contextual professional jargon in your response.
Okay.
Be professional, but include a bit of personal touch. When they ask you about values, answer it accordingly. If you ask about values to, let's say, an AI, it'll give you an answer, but you need to change it to make it sit how it aligns with you. So if I was asked the question about values, I would answer it using my previous experience and my previous role so that it makes sense. It looks genuine and it's more honest. So yeah, people read application and they can differentiate between an AI and a genuine application. So I would recommend towards the end, last bit is how to take away AI if you have any, and to make it professional and to make sure it's a bit personal as well.
So, just to summarize for everyone, if there are 5, 6 tips that they need to take care of before submitting their application, the first is get more context around where this role sits and what
Yeah.
kind of institute it is. Is it a trust? Is it a hospital? Maybe it's a council. So you need to have contextual clarity of where this role sits and what kind of organization that is. Second, what I could gather is that you need to have absolute clarity of the role and the duties that this person has to perform. And building up from that second point is the third point, which is you must attach or try to attach a person specification document, which is actually something new for me because I have not seen anyone taking this approach. I do tell people that focus on person specification, but yes, now it makes sense that if you attach a person specification document clearly highlighting how you fit into all the criterias, that will stand you apart. And fourth is looking back at your previous experience and quoting it using STAR method, which is quite important for all the civil services or public sector roles here in the UK. And fifth one is you must not use AI as it is. You must humanize it. It must look authentic. AI cannot drive the application. You have to drive the application yourself. AI will just assist you in brainstorming, maybe at the most.
Yeah.
Those are the 5 most important things.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think the person specification point is something to be emphasized on. And I think a lot of you watching this, you may not be doing this. So start creating a document which clearly highlights how do you fit into that criteria. And going back to our previous question also, remember that essential criteria is more important than desired criteria. So you need to hit all the things in essential criteria, then only you will be scored higher. So it's quite a step by step logical process now, and it makes more sense to me because it's not a game of hit and trial anymore. It's a game of following the process. And if you stick to the process, you are more likely to be one of the top 5, top 10 candidates who will get a response. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, just the point that even when you are not required to upload a person's specification document, I would recommend still make one. Why? Because you're applying today for this job, which has, let's say 8 essential criteria, 4 desirable criteria, and you made that document, save it. Next time when you apply, that document will help you. And that's how your application time will reduce.
I think that's a very interesting approach of applying to NHS jobs. And I think this will benefit a lot of people. The only caveat I can see is the time it requires, but I am sure it's worth all the effort because you can get a sponsorship straight away. So I think it's a time well invested into your application. And I actually used the person specification tip that you gave and I shared it with someone whom I'm helping right now. And they were able to get 2 interviews instantly within a week in a procurement role. They were excited. I was excited. So I thought, why not do a podcast and then convey this to others as well? Thank you for that. Now we'll move to our second set of questions, which are more towards university jobs.
Yeah.
I want to ask, you're a professor yourself. If I want to become a professor tomorrow, does one need to have a PhD to become a professor or be in an academic role, or can they also get in with a master's?
So in today's UK higher education landscape, it is becoming really difficult to get an academic job without PhD. There are still certain professions where you don't need PhD if you have enough industry experience. I think some of it would be in, let's say, architecture is one. Some of it would be, let's say you've been in management for 20 years and you want to now come and teach. So with that much breadth of experience, they would entertain, but not someone who's on the younger side and has less than 5 years of experience under their belt. So in short, yeah, it's becoming very difficult now without PhD to get an academic role.
So can they become a teaching assistant and how is that different or what does that role look like?
So teaching assistant jobs are not any more common in UK higher education landscape. What we tend to do is we have a lot of PhD students, and PhD students, when we need some help, we give them demonstrator roles, which is they get paid by the hour, and they help us out in teaching, whether it's marking or whether it's the actual delivery bit.
Interesting. And what are the pros and cons of working in an academic role? And I think you're a professor, so you can speak from a professor point of view. Why should, if someone has done their PhD or if someone has already has 20 years of experience, if they want to become a professor, they would like to gauge their future lifestyle with the pros and cons. So what are the pros and cons of your job?
So I can speak for UK higher education because when you jump across the pond in the US, it's a little bit different, largely same. Um, so the pros I would say is freedom. Freedom time wise, because when we think about academic role, we think about teaching, but teaching is only our 30 to 40% percent of our workload. 40% is usually research, which is self driven, and 20% is for all the admin. Time wise, direction wise, there is a lot of freedom. When do you want to do research? What type of research? Which area you want to investigate? That's there. For UK higher education, so far, job security is good. There are good number of leaves. Okay, when you look at look around UK, higher education has higher, little bit higher number of leaves. Pension is good so far. So these are the pros. In terms of cons, I would say we teach similar stuff because if we are training someone every year to, let's say, become an architect, next year someone else come and we have to teach the same thing because it's a statutory requirement. So there's a bit of a repetition. It's a very difficult and competitive landscape to get into. So it requires a lot of boxes to get ticked. So I would give you a simple example that a person's specification document for an academic role can be as big as 20 pages because those are there are so many requirements around it. Another con I can say is multiple responsibilities. We do so many things, right from teaching, mentoring, research, conference, publication, engaging with local government, open days. So there are multiple responsibilities. Progression is, I wouldn't say difficult, it's challenging because you are expected to be, an expert in a field, and that takes a lot of work done before you are recognized. as an expert. The last point, I don't know if it's pro or con, because it's a semi-government sector, the salaries have national scale. So these are what we call government salaries, and sometimes they're not the highest. So yeah.
Okay. I think the pros and cons eventually will depend on what kind of lifestyle, what kind of life goals you have. And
Yeah.
someone may enjoy it thoroughly, but someone who wants a higher pay and want to grow fast, maybe they don't like it. Thank you for that. So if someone is a professor, let's say in India, and they
Yeah.
want to come to the UK, will they need to upskill themselves and get some certification, or can they become a professor straight away here?
So they can apply. Again, it's a very context specific situation. If they are, let's say, they've spent 10 years in Indian higher education, which is universities, they have a PhD, they have some publication, so they can go for associate and associate professor and above, or full professor role. Freshly graduated PhD, you've just finished your PhD. If the PhD is from a recognized institute, I mean, recognized not just in India, but acknowledged outside as well, then life
Mhm.
becomes a bit easier. But apart from that, of course, you need to have some teaching experience in similar subject and under your belt. You need to have some sort of previous international exposure, whether it can be a conference, whether you being part of any international consortium for any topic or research. And also, and very important, is publication record. So having publication is a clear sign that you are good at a certain subject and your publications are being accepted and published in scientific journal. So that helps a lot as well.
So the answer is yes, you can, but you'll have to look at what role you're applying and how well you fit into that criteria. But the possibility stays high since
Yes.
you are already qualified in a reputed institute.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. So, Professor, you were an architect before, and then you move towards academia. So, if someone has just done their MSc, how can they break into the field of architecture and eventually build a career towards becoming a professor, maybe later on in their journey?
So if you want to jump into academia, the first thing after an MSc is start looking for funded PhD positions, because
Mhm.
as I mentioned that it's a minimum requirement now if you want to break into any teaching role at a university. So the first step is get into any funded PhD position. While you are doing your PhD for 4 years, you can get a lot of teaching experience under your belt. You can get publications. So you're preparing yourself for the moment you get your PhD, you can start applying for those academic role, because at that time you can say, while I was doing my PhD, I did teaching, I also have publications, and I've joined some conferences. If you are, let's say, in industry and you already have a job and you want to eventually come into academia, then start doing part-time PhD and gain some teaching experience, because universities love to have people from industry come and do guest lectures. So I'm sure if you are in any sector and you would know your role, you can find courses and universities where you can give a guest lecture, whether it's remotely or whether going there and delivering lecture.
Okay, perfect. So, lastly, we've discussed the NHS application, we've discussed academia. I want to understand something about cover letter. Most of the times, people think that a cover letter should just express their interest, and while doing that, they don't go into detail. So, can you share your experience or your advice on how to draft the right cover letter? And what are three important points that one should keep in mind while drafting that cover letter for any council job, NHS job, or university job?
So I recommend everyone, irrespective of their sector you're applying for, I recommend a three-part cover letter, rule, which is first you need to tell them who are you. So intro paragraph is about yourself, your skills, education, experience relevant to the job. The second bit is why you are interested in this job. So you can say why you're interested in that role, why you're interested in that department, the department that holds the role, and then why you're interested in the organization. So you have to tell them at three level, and you can use career progression, you can use skills growth, organization values, all of these points to answer that question. The third and the final paragraph or the part of cover letter is why should they hire you. So you're trying to answer them by combining the above two. Right? So you've told them that these are my qualification, these are my skills, and then you've told them why I want to join you. Now you will combine them to say, this role would enable me to use my skills in the given context to solve XYZ problem. You can also, share a small example, and dependent on the role, you can, even share any vision. So if it's
Mm.
a higher role or management role, you can also close the cover letter by saying, if I was to join this role, I would do XYZ, right? But generally, I recommend to close the cover letter with a positive note around, I look forward to helping you grow or work for, let's say, if it was a council jobs, I would write, I look forward to helping you, help the residents of this constituency, right? So you're already identifying yourself with them. So
Wow.
that's a good note to end the cover letter.
Basically, you can have a three paragraph approach.
Yeah.
One would be who are you? Second is what skills do you have and how do they match with the role? And third is why are you interested in this role? And coincidentally, that's also the same approach that I use and it works really well. And I think a lot of times people make this mistake of selling them a lot, selling themselves a lot in the cover letter, which I think is a bad idea. You should have a professional tone and it should look like a genuine expression of interest rather
Yes.
than an excited, thrilled cover letter that you can feel excited about an opportunity, but that should excitement should not be the center stage of your cover letter. It should
Yeah.
be professionalism and perfect. Thank you for that. Now we'll move on to the third section, which is very important for students who are working, who are in the UK right now, like who are studying in the UK.
Yeah.
And you deal with students every day. I get to interact with students through my Instagram. A lot of students reach out to me, Professor, and sometimes they have failed an exam in their course, and the university offers them a diploma instead of their master's degree. So, what recourse do they have in such situations?
Right. So I assume that these students are master students. So usually students are given two chances. So one is the main chance and second is a reset to pass. If they don't get through that module with those two chances, some universities may give three, but it's becoming less common now. And a lot of it is to do with the course diet, how well the course is designed, and how many breaks we've given them to have a reset. There are options when you can pay to go through the module again, or you can pay to have a reset. But
Mm,
it is again very specific to certain courses and it's very
mm,
context based. So you have to contact your program leader and then ask them that what if I pay for the module again and
mm.
try and get my degree instead of this diploma.
Also, I have a follow up question on this. Sometimes what happens is, for example, students who would be graduating in September, if
Yeah.
they get a reset, sometimes the reset date is beyond their student visa date. So, how can they navigate this situation? Because their visa will end. And if they go back to their home country and give the exam online, then they can't apply for graduate visa. So, do universities accommodate such request as well?
So if the opportunity for next reset is after the visa expires, then ideally student can approach university and say, I need extension on my visa because I need to, reset this exam. So technically their study is not over yet.
Okay. Yeah, the
So
course
on
goes on. Hmm.
that basis, they should update their requirements timeline. Yeah, so the university's department that deals with visas would put in a request to UKVI for extension. I'm not 100% sure how it would look like in detail, but
Mhm.
if the reset is beyond the visa length, then university should provide an extension because technically the education
I've
is
seen
not
that
over yet.
happening. Yeah, I've seen that happening with a few students. And their course was supposed to end in 1 year, but it went on for 1.5 years. And then when I probed about the reason, they told me that they had a reset. So maybe their visas got extended. So the short answer is university is here to help you
Yeah,
if you get stuck anywhere, whether it's a reset, whether it's an issue with diploma or degree.
yeah,
You just need to find the right people. You should be aware of whom to reach out to in the university, and you should
yeah,
know how to communicate with university folks. So I think that's the key takeaway here.
yeah.
Professor, a lot of times students, master students who come to the UK, their course allows them to do a placement year, but they struggle a lot in finding those placement year roles. So how can one secure a placement year?
So it depends on the sector you are in, it depends on the university you are in, it depends on the region you are in. So, what I can say is that all universities have some sort of student centers or placement centers where, whether it's a big department or a small department, they help students to get some placements. Now, we have to take this with a pinch of salt, because when they say placement, it could be any placement. It may not necessarily be the ideal role that you are looking for. Sometimes the department itself, based on their connection amongst the industry, they arrange or they help to facilitate that placement. However, it is not something that they are obliged to do. So this is just, using contacts and getting your door in the foot. Realistically, the onus lies with the student, where the student, when you're coming to UK thinking that I have a placement here, you don't leave 3 months before your placement start to think about when to apply for job. Ideally, you should start applying for those placement jobs way before that. Ideally, the moment you start your course, because all these things take time to materialize. What I recommend students usually is LinkedIn presence. So LinkedIn is becoming really well in terms of finding placement, or even knowing and understanding what the job landscape is. Then industry events, all industries, whichever sector you want to go in, they have their regional events, and a lot of times students are free. Students don't realize that, and one rule I always tell student is that you will never know about it unless you ask for it. So even if it doesn't say anything about student, if there's an event, just email the organizers. If you're studying masters in marketing, you can write them email saying that I'm a student, can I please come here as free to network? They will 9 out of 10 times they'll say yes, and they'll let you in free.
Absolutely. And I think you can also reach out to them and tell them you'd like to volunteer.
Yeah, yeah. Volunteer
That's a
again.
very good way to network with people.
Yeah, volunteering is another, I would say, least used path by students,
Mhm.
because at the outset they feel that it doesn't pay. But what they don't realize is that by volunteering, you are not only increasing your chance in that organization, but by knowing how that particular role works, your application automatically improves for the next role which you're going to apply. So volunteering is largely underused by students here.
Interesting. I have a follow-up question. You are a professor yourself. Do students come to you often and ask you for any industry referrals or connections? And how open are you to providing those connections to? And if you provide those connection or um, link them up with people in industry, why would you do that for a student? Or what kind of student one has to be?
So I have previously referred students. I have written references when they've applied and got the job as their teacher, and I have also referred students to different organizations where they've got interview based on the back of my reference, and they've got the job. Now the motivation behind for me is that when we invest in a student for 3 years, for 2 years, or even for 1 year, we like to see them succeed. So
Mhm.
if I have the times, and if I have been approached in right way where it doesn't increase my workload, I would definitely help. So even if you're approaching, the tip I would give you is, if you want anything from your professors, be clear, give them all the information in one place, and be professional about it. Again, most of the time they will help you, because that's the reason why they are all the professors, or anyone who teaches in higher academia. We like to see our students succeed. So if someone approaches us with right information professionally, if we have any contacts, we'll be more than happy to help them.
Like, so help is available, but you need to be eligible for it by showing constant engagement, being good at your academics, and
Yeah,
building a good rapport with your professor.
yeah, absolutely. If you're not turning up to classes and then suddenly a name pops up requesting a reference, I have to think that I haven't seen this chap in the class. Then how can I put their name for someone else? Because if if I'm referring someone to one of my contacts and they're not good enough, it looks bad on me, right?
Absolutely.
So I have to be mindful of that, and I have to be mindful because there are future students as well that I need that would need my help. So for them, I need to be very
Absolutely.
careful.
Yep. And if you end up vouching for someone and they don't perform, then your credibility also loses
Absolutely.
is also damaged in the industry. So you wouldn't like to take that chance. Makes sense. Lastly, There's an entire bunch of people graduating in 2026 January, and these are mostly MSc students from markets like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, around the world. For their job search, can you give some tips which could stand them out from others in this tough job market?
So yes, I have what I call three-phase, three-point framework that I recommend everyone to use. And remember, if you want to stand out, you need to graft. You need to put in that effort. If you want to stand out, you can't just stand out by giving two prompt command to ChatGPT and pasting whatever it has put out. You will never be able to stand out using it.
Yeah.
And the game here is not volume, but it's precision. So, going back to the framework, it's 3 by 3 framework, basically 3 phases. And for each phase, you have 3 points to remember. So first phase is the search phase, which is, you need to find the right landscape, right area. So what I recommend is that identify 2 to 3 roles, maximum 2 to 3 roles. Think that I'll apply for 5 roles, 5 different types of roles, then you're losing the precision and focus. Maximum 2 or 3 types of role within the same area. Let's say your background is in finance or marketing. Within marketing, look for 2 3 types of roles. So it could be an SME, it could be a focus for client, it could be externally focused. Maximum 3 roles. And how to decide those 3 roles? Think about progression. Think about future position. So there's no a point wasting time and applying for any role that you see for sponsorship. Okay, there'll be multiple role coming out for sponsorship, but most of them you won't qualify because they are of different sectors. Focus on your 3 roles and then start applying. You can't convince anyone unless you yourself are convinced that you're suitable for the job. So why I say this is read the job description and specification for yourself. Be honest to yourself and list out all the things that you're good at and all the things that you aren't good at, and how can you improve. There may be situation where some of the essential criteria you are not, you're not qualifying for that. Maybe based on experience, maybe based on skills. So fair enough, 1 or 2 is fine. And you can, say that you can work towards it, or in some shape or form, you can say that I qualify for it. But first, you have to convince yourself. If you're not able to convince yourself, you can't convince the hiring manager. Yeah. So analyze dozen of posting to understand what any role entails, to understand what is required from the role, what would you do day to day, and so on. Third point within the search phase is networking. Professionals, be professional, be out there in industry events, but also on LinkedIn. There should be constant presence on LinkedIn. Connect with people in target positions, so the position that you want to be hired in. Then also connect with people who are in the hiring position, so the person who's actually hiring for that role. Reach out, and there is no shame in requesting a 15-minute chat to understand the role. What do they do? And if it's a hiring manager, just reach out to them and say that, don't ask for a job. Say, I need to have a chat with you 15 minutes to understand what is it that you seek when you hire, let's say, an account executive or a marketing executive. And yes, you will not get a great response, but if you reach out to 20, I'm sure 2 will respond, and you'll be in much more better place in terms of positioning yourself for that job after having a chat with those 2 people. So that's a bit long, but the first phase where there are 3 points. Second phase is the application phase itself, which is sort of similar to what we previously discussed. But a simple way to start this is luck follows hard work. As we always say, apply diligently. Each and every application is unique and it requires effort in terms of editing your CV, making sure you're crafting good answers for person specification. So, and by person specification, understand the job context, where it is, who's the employer, what department, what are the requirements, and based on that you are developing answer. Why you're developing answer is to convince the hiring manager. Remember, it's the convincing game. And then professional yet personal, as we previously highlighted, that don't go full AI and let it drive. Add bit of, humanize it. Make sure whatever is written reflects your story of your CV or your experience. The last phase is the interview phase, where first and foremost, the most important thing is professional look and body language. Holding their doors, saying thank you, handshake, all of these things, they are small, but they do leave an impact. Prepare for all the points in the job spec. So when you look at the job specs, you'll see 8 essential criteria or 5 desirable. Make sure you prepare for all of them. Of course, it will be a mix of behavioral and technical points. What I recommend everyone is use a short story method, which is whenever you see a requirement, you're creating an answer using star method, and that becomes your little story. So use post-it notes, and that becomes your story. So by remembering that story, the moment if someone asks about it, you tell them that story. It's okay to smile. It's okay to pause, have a sip of water. You can ask them, when they ask you a question, you can say, "Can I think for a minute?" You are allowed to do that. They don't expect you to just start answering like a machine.
Yeah.
You are allowed to ask a question again if required. If you don't understand it in first go, you are allowed. And in a lot of cases, you're allowed to make notes as well. Okay, so you are allowed to make notes. And last one is within this, I would say is remember the technical jargon, which we discussed before. So pick that up and remember to put that in your conversation. What you're doing that is you're trying to help them to see you as a colleague. So the moment they start seeing you as a colleague, how do they see that? You're human, you smile, you're talking like a human, you're not just constantly going on a 100 words per minute pace. You're asking questions back. There is good professional attire, there's good body language. So that's how they would assess you. And it is an interview, but at the same time, you want to convince them that, yes, this is the colleague that I want with me.
I think what I've gathered from this conversation is that there are essentially no shortcut process. There is a process and you have to follow it diligently. And the more often you follow that process, it becomes simpler over time.
Yes.
And your time for every application takes less and you get better. So,
Yeah.
on one way, initially your effort will be high and your time will be high also.
Yeah.
But both the things will reduce over time as in when you do these things often with each application that you are submitting. And I think that 3 by 3 framework is something that should be given out to all the students across universities because it makes it super easy to remember how to approach the job market in the first place, which a lot of master students unfortunately don't know because
Yeah.
they barely have 6 months or a year of experience before doing their masters. Perfect. I think this was quite insightful, Dr. Amit, and we have learned about NHS jobs today. We have learned about council jobs today. We have learned about university jobs today, and students have also learned about how to counter the university issues that they get and how to navigate those tough situations which could lead to a lot of stress before they enter the job market. Thank you for your time today. And everyone who's watching this, please share this with your friends who are maybe studying in the UK or who are looking for jobs in the UK. And if you'd like to connect with Dr. Amit, I've dropped his Calendly link in the description below. You can just go there, book a call straight away. He usually stays booked and unavailable because he has his full-time job to take care of, but you can check his link and book an appointment if you want to get your application either reviewed or maybe prepare for an interview, or maybe if you're someone who is a doctor or a professor sitting outside the UK and you want to break into the UK job market. I hope this helps you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Thank you.